I argue that there is no basis under the Constitution for the president to declare a state of emergency. That is the first argument we have to resolve.
Why is that?
Because Section 305, that has now been quoted by all Nigerians, is not ambiguous. It is not confusing. There is clarity in the wordings on the circumstances that must exist before a state of emergency can be declared. I'll quickly just highlight them. Number one, if the Federation is at war, I'm not aware that Nigeria is at war with any foreign country. If the Nigeria is being invaded, there's an invasion of the country, the president can declare a state of emergency. If there is actual, the Constitution uses the word actual breakdown of law and order. And you see, breakdown of law and order here is not when Agberos at Obalende are changing blows, and they begin to carry machete and pursue one another. No, the breakdown of law and order that is envisaged by the Constitution has to be such a proportion, such a dimension that extraordinary measures are required to immediately restore order. Now, when you are even declaring state of emergency, you cannot declare state of emergency in an entire state if the breakdown of law and order is not in the entire state, or is not such that has made governance in that state impossible. Now, it also says if there is imminent breakdown of law and order or natural disaster. Now, what is the law that has broken down in Rivers State? Because the breakdown of law and order here is not disagreement between organs of government on how to discharge their functions. It has to do with threat to life. It has to do with people being killed, properties being burnt. To the best of my knowledge, there was no basis to declare state of emergency. They said, oh, a pipeline was blown. Even as I'm talking to you, that pipeline has been fixed for media reports. But what has that got to do with the office of governor of Rivers State? And as I said, for you, and what was the emergency? When did the emergency arise? Now, assuming without conceding, for argument's sake, that there was even a basis to declare, I have argued that there is none. Can you remove a governor who is elected just like you? Because under the Constitution, Nigeria, Section 2, Nigeria is a federation consisting of states and the Federal Capital Territory. The governor is the head of a federating unit. He's elected just like the president. The governor by Section 180, community reading along with Section 189, cannot cease to hold office except he dies, he resigns, is impeached, or he becomes permanently incapacitated.
Sorry to cut you in there, because I know you're a lawyer, and I just wanted to lay a few things out, just as the counter-argument that I have been seeing from people. There's the talk of what President Obasanjo did in the past. Yes. There's the talk of what President Jonathan has done in the past as well. There's an act that nobody knows whether a bill that nobody knows whether it became law in 2018. All of these things keep coming up. You mentioned the pipelines being bombed there, and there's like the arguments about how it affects Nigeria's resources and Nigeria's income. That is a powerhouse of our country, whether we like it or not. And that directly could be interpreted to mean a breakdown of law and order. Don't these arguments mean anything?
No, it doesn't hold water. It is an argument hanging in the sky. Because, to begin with, if you are going to use pipeline vandalization as an excuse to declare a state of emergency, I personally find the argument about whether the president can suspend a governor or not offensive. It is an argument that should never even be put forward. But whether there is a basis to declare state of emergency, if it is pipeline vandalization, why is governor of Bayelsa still in office? Because just 3 days after, a pipeline was blown in Bayelsa. Since this president became president, Nigeria has lost billions, if not trillions, due to vandalization of oil installations and due to the theft of oil in the Niger Delta. Why has the president not declared state of emergency to remove? And by the way, does the governor control the pipeline? Is the governor the appointer of the Inspector General of Police? Is it the appointer of the Chief of Naval Staff? Is it the governor that awarded pipeline protection contract to Tombolo and others? So this is an excuse that the president has manufactured in his head. And let us be more serious. Even if you are saying that because there is an insecurity in a state, you want to remove the governor. Mr. Ebuka, as I'm talking to you, people are fleeing their homes in their thousands in Ondo State. The president has not declared state of emergency. As I'm talking to you, there is crisis in Osun State. Communal crisis where people are running everywhere. The president hasn't even come out to say anything. In the north, people are being slaughtered. So if it is that one there's insecurity, you must remove the chief executive officer, Tinubu himself should no longer be president.
How do we get out of it?
Well, the Nigerian judiciary is the Nigerian judiciary. It is not an American judiciary. It is not Congolese judiciary. It is not Zimbabwean judiciary. Judiciary existing in Nigeria is a reflection of the Nigerian society. Now, if you look at what has happened in Rivers State, let's even start from Parliament. I personally am not surprised. You have a man at the Senate who is the former governor of my state. I always say I can write a book in volumes about Godswill Akpabio. I don't want to discuss him today. But you have a National Assembly that almost all their members stood on their feet singing, on your mandate, under your mandate, Bola, on your they are standing on Tinubu's mandate. The question is, what is that mandate? I had asked on this same TV station. Is it a mandate of corruption? Is it a mandate of accountability? Is it a mandate to ensure that we have stable electricity? They are still standing on Tinubu's mandate. You know what makes this laughable? The Senate president is a lawyer. A senior lawyer for that matter. Section 11 of the Constitution is clear that where House of Assembly cannot perform its legislative responsibilities, the National Assembly has the power temporarily to assume the legislative functions of the House of Assembly. But guess what, Mr. Ebuka? That same Section 11 says that where that is the case, they shall not have power to remove the governor or deputy governor. So assuming that the argument is even that the Rivers State House of Assembly is unable to function, okay, and the National Assembly is to intervene, the Constitution says they cannot remove the governor. Now, guess what again? The administrator, sole administrator, I don't even know. I saw I don't know, because I mean, you are in entertainment, you're a big shot in entertainment. I did not see you. I know you're not a comedian, but I did not see all the Sabinos and the others in the villa when Tinubu was carrying out that comic display in the name of swearing in a sole administrator. You say you are swearing him in. With which constitution? Which oath of office? Because under the constitution.
And he took office before the National Assembly. Even.
Before the National, he swore in on the same day.
Of course, it was predetermined. But I'm saying, which oath did he subscribe to? Is there enough oath for sole administrator under our constitution? And you are saying, they have even now released, from what I read, about 400 billion that was withheld based on the judgment of the Supreme Court. Because you mentioned the judiciary. Supreme Court says that because the governor did not recognize the Amawele-led house, did not present the budget to them, therefore there is justification to withhold Rivers State allocation. Now, Tinubu, in his broadcast to Nigerians, said that Fubara did not implement the decision of the Supreme Court. But in you now, wanting to claim you want to obey the constitution, you have gone ahead to remove the governor, remove the deputy governor, remove the house. You are now releasing the budget. That Speaker said should be withheld because there was no House of Assembly to a sole administrator after you have dissolved the same House of Assembly. So you see how they are making a mockery of our country. And Section 120 and 121 is clear that 1 kobo of the resources of a state cannot be appropriated, cannot be used without what is called an appropriation law. This Vice Admiral Libok that has now been appointed as sole administrator, which budget is he going to implement with the money that has been released to him? This is an illegality that has been cooked in the villa, and I will even say it is a coup against the government of Rivers State. Because the very idea of saying that you are suspending a House of Assembly of a state, you are suspending a governor of a state, is unheard of. It is totally unacceptable. There is no legal argument that can support this. And in any event, the governor has 4 years. He cannot be denied 1 hour of that 4 years, except for the circumstances that are earlier highlighted. So who is the president to say that he can sit in the villa, make a broadcast, and remove the governor? What stops Tinubu tomorrow from suspending the 36 state governors? All he needs to do is to manufacture a non-existent excuse. And that is why the Nigerian Bar Association, which I am a member, the current leadership led by Famosigwe SN, has rightly deprecated what has happened. And I pray that the courts will intervene. Finally, when this happened in Plateau State, because you mentioned Plateau in 2004, people are saying, oh, Obasanjo did it. Who is Obasanjo? A military general? Who did they appoint? General Chris Ali, that was appointed in Plateau State. Ebuka, I want you to ask those who are listening, why is it that when a sole administrator is appointed, there's always someone with a military background? Because the very idea of appointing a sole administrator in a democracy is a product of the military, is a product of dictatorship. Now, when that matter went to the Supreme Court, unfortunately, the Supreme Court lost an opportunity to pronounce on it on technical grounds, saying that as at the time Dariye brought that action, or authorized the bringing of that action, the man who was sole administrator did not give consent to it. That is why Fubara cannot go to the Supreme Court. But why has Fubara not gone to the Federal High Court to challenge it? Because it looks like we're even crying more than they bereave. I look at him today, coming out of the church in Port Harcourt. He's still smiling, wearing white. In his broadcast, he was still saying, in his statement, he was still saying, Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President, Tinubu has removed him from office. Fubara should become a man and begin to speak like a governor of a state. And it is very embarrassing that the 36 state governors are now becoming poets. They issued give Nigerians poetry to read, that they cannot intervene in a partisan matter. The SASAD governors are divided. It shows you what we call complete state capture. That all institutions in our country today have been viciously captured. That you cannot find a single person, a single institution that is able to stand up and reprimand this president for what he has done. And when Nigerians went to protest during the End Bad Governance, they were charged for treason, for carrying Russian flag. And some of them were asking the military to take over. Today, Tinubu has handed over Rivers State to the military. Because the man that is sole administrator is a member of the military, even though he has resigned. And look at the man. He says he wants to restore law and order. Before he was appointed, were schools on fire? Were churches not functioning in Rivers State? Were civil servants not going to work? What is the law and order that you want to restore? This is an illegality that Tinubu has bettered. And Nigerians have a responsibility to oppose it.
You were going to say?
I just wanted to add.
It is very difficult. Let me even comment on the Raye, the co-members matter.
Yeah.
So far, the NYC seems to have retreated. I'm in contact with her. I hope she had briefed me to represent her. I'm hoping that their retreating will be permanent. We don't want to hear their voice on this matter. If NYC has any concern on what Raye has said, they should talk to their DG, the member of the executive arm of government, to whisper to President Tinubu to address the situation that Nigeria has found itself. But if the NYC tries to meddle in this matter, they will only be trying to incite core members to react in a way that they don't preempt, that they cannot preempt. Because there is nothing in the bylaws of the NYC, there is nothing in the NYC Act that empowers the NYC to have even intervened in that matter. A core member is not an employee of the government. A core member is not a civil servant. The NYC is not a military nor a paramilitary organization, contrary to the misconception of some people. The NYC Act, if you look at the Act itself, is only a scheme that was introduced in 1973 to allow Nigerians to serve their country. Nobody is issued a letter of employment by the NYC. You are supposed to be thanked. In fact, what Raye did is an act of national service. So what she deserves is an award. But regarding how Nigerians should take back their country, we have to take it back on the streets. This is not a battle that we are going to win in the courts, unfortunately. because the judiciary is also limited in terms of what they can do.
But that's what the government's always worried about when you talk about the streets now. Because
Well, they have
the
to
worry
be
is always, what does it become?
Yes.
Which is why, I guess, from the government's perspective,
When Tinubu-
it's always halted before it starts.
When President Tinubu was in the streets, what was his worry? Was he afraid? This president today, when they were in the opposition, it sickens me that this party, APC, that came to power through protest, you recall the Occupy Nigeria movement, the role that they played. Suddenly today, protest has become a treasonable act. This is our country. We cannot run away. How do you live in a country where you have a president, you have a first lady, you have the first son, you have the first daughter? The one family has basically... Have you not seen videos of Seyi Tinubu being given preference over ministers? Mr. Ebuka, in which serious country do you permit that? Have you seen the convoy that Seyi Tinubu moves around? Have you seen the convoy of the president and the senate president? These people are taking us for a ride. They believe Nigerians are conquered people. It is left for us to determine whether we will permit this or not. But we have to begin to demand systemic and drastic changes in the way things are done. And it is because they are not afraid, Ebuka. They claim that they have approved the so-called emergency. The constitution said you need 2/3. Mr. Ebuka, there is no journalist in Nigeria. Nobody in Nigeria today can give you the number of senators that voted in favor of the emergency. Why? Because it was by voice vote. How do you determine 2/3 by voice? People just screaming, yeah. How do you determine 2/3 of that? How do you determine 2/3 by voice? It has to be by head count. So the National Assembly embarrassed itself. The National Assembly has abdicated its responsibility. And that is why I say that what we have now is a case of parliamentary redundancy. They have become redundant. They no longer realize the responsibilities that they have. And it is painful. Because when the military struck, only the judiciary was preserved. Normally they will dissolve the executive, dissolve the legislature, and now use Oster clauses to limit the powers of our courts. But the judiciary is always standing. But these lawmakers, so-called lawmakers, that are saying that on Tinubu's mandate they must stand, they did not even have the decency to allow for a head count. To even say, oh, we want to legitimize the legality. The fact that there was no head count, that we cannot say how many members of the House of Reps voted for the emergency. We cannot say how many senators voted. It shows you how decayed, it shows you how flawed our governance system is. And that is why the people must make up their minds whether they want to live as slaves or they want to live as citizens. Because what is happening today, quite sadly, is looking at as if Nigerians are being treated as slaves in their own country. And it pains me that you couldn't have even one senator, not even the Senate minority leader, not the minority whip, not even one. The Syria Dixon, former governor Bayelsa, that even tried to speak. He had to work out with Abaribe and others. Opposition is dead in the National Assembly. Opposition is dead in our country. The same thing in the House of Reps. It is very shameful. It is very shameful that this is the situation that we have found ourselves. And I want to disagree with him. Tinubu is not a Democrat. You know, in mass communication, there's what we call proper labeling. I don't know where Tinubu said he's a Democrat. If he had claimed to be a Democrat in the past, his assumption of office as president and his actions has shown that, contrary to what he has said, this is a full dictatorship. So they are not pretending to be Democrats. They know they are not Democrats. Tinubu himself knows that he's not a Democrat. No Democrat will wake up and say, you are removing a democratically elected governor from office.
Well,
we have 30 seconds.
The challenge is up to President Tinubu. Nigerians must know that INEC is the weapon fashioned against you. If we fail to reform INEC and the electoral process, we have failed to reform anything. That is our first line of accountability. President Tinubu, I want to believe that you are a Democrat. Commit to conducting free, fair, and credible elections, and then pass the challenge to the National Assembly, the Senate, and the House Speaker. If they fail to do so, Nigerians must get ready to exert the necessary civil pressure and ensure that you reform your electoral process. Other than that, these shenanigans will continue. There is no solution. We are addressing symptoms and leaving cause of problem.
Thank you very much, Peter Aka. Thank you very much, Inebe Effiong. This is probably the least I've spoken on a segment of this show. Thanks for enlightening us and speaking the minds of a lot of Nigerians. And we'll keep looking at the government and all the arms of government to step up. Don't just stand there teasing me.